Hey, and welcome back to Dishing Out. On today's episode, I say, whatever Thomas Jefferson has brought together, let no man put asunder. Okay, so maybe Thomas Jefferson didn't actually invent macaroni and cheese. I mean, various dishes that incorporate pasta and butter and dairy and cheese actually date back to the 13th or 14th century. But in 1802, Thomas Jefferson did serve a dish containing elbow macaroni and cheese. He called it a pie called macaroni. It was served at a state dinner, and some years later, a very similar recipe showed up in an 1824 cookbook, a recipe which called for pasta, butter, and cheese to be layered and then baked. Since that time, macaroni and cheese has gained and risen in popularity in America to where it now resides as what I would have to say is one of our top 5 comfort foods and iconic dishes. It should call to mind a gooey, rich cheese sauce, soft pasta that yields just when you bite it, and perhaps a crispy topping. There's a lot of ways to cook macaroni and cheese, but at the end of the day, as long as it's cheesy and tasty, you've probably done it right. Today, we're going to look at 2 different preparations, so let's get started. Any great macaroni and cheese dish has 3 important components: your cheese, your sauce, and of course, the pasta. Now, for our baked macaroni and cheese recipe, I'm going to be using corkscrews or cavatappi. Not technically traditional, but they have more surface area, more ridges, and an even longer hole down the middle to soak up and absorb all that rich cheese sauce that we are going to coat them in. I should also note, my choice of pasta is in no way a political statement. It's just purely what brand was available in my store. Alright, with our pasta situation taken care of, it's time to talk about cheese. Now, you don't need more than 1 cheese to make a great macaroni and cheese, and if you're only using just one, I would suggest cheddar. I prefer extra sharp. I like some bite in my cheese sauce, but any kind of cheddar would be typical and classic. For our recipe today, I'm going to actually incorporate some Gruyere cheese as well. Now, most people hear Swiss cheese and they think of that white stuff with the holes in it. Well, in actuality, that's actually nothing to do with Switzerland at all. Gruyere cheese is actually from Switzerland. It's aged in caves. The particular one that I have here was aged for over 150 days. And you want to take a close look here. Somewhere on the packaging you should see the letters AOP. And it should say that it's actually a product of Switzerland. These 2 things, in particular the AOP, indicate, in a foreign language of course, that this is from a protected point of origin. So in other words, this had to come from Switzerland. It cannot be imitation. So for our recipe today, we need 1 pound of cheese, which I have here, but since we're also using 6 ounces of Gruyere, I'm only going to shred up about a little more than half of this block of extra sharp cheddar, and I'll shred up our Gruyere cheese. And yes, I'm shredding it myself. Why? Pre-shredded cheese that often comes in bags at the supermarket is more than just cheese. After it's shredded, it has an anti-caking agent, usually in the form of cornstarch, potato starch, and some other wonderful goodies, that is added to it to keep it so that it can do this. I don't see any need for that, so just grate your own cheese and leave the other junk out. Now, in order to get the cheese and the pasta to really come together the way that we want, we need a sauce. Now, you can certainly just use some butter or some milk, cream, and kind of mix everything together, but it's not going to have the right consistency. For us to get what we're looking for, we need a bechamel, one of the 5 mother sauces of French cooking, which pretty much forms the foundation of all Western and European cuisine. Bechamel, along with velouté, hollandaise, espagnole, and tomato, are the 5 mother sauces. Bechamel is really nothing more than a dairy or milk-based sauce that's thickened with a roux. What's a roux, you may say? Let me show you. Making a roux is as simple as combining a fat and flour together in roughly equal portions. For our recipe today, we're going to be using 4 tablespoons of butter, and we're going to let that melt gently over medium heat. As the butter begins to mostly melt down, we're going to add in a 1/4 cup or 4 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. And we are going to combine these ingredients together. Now, we definitely want to make sure we cook the flour for a couple of minutes once it is totally incorporated into the butter, but we don't want to cook it too much beyond that. A roux is a thickening agent, and the more blonde it is, or the less cooked it is, the more thickening power it will have. Now, we want it to be a fairly strong thickener for our bechamel sauce. If you let it cook for 20, 30, 40 minutes, stirring it frequently, you'll get a brown or brick roux, which is actually the basis of a lot of Cajun and Creole cooking such as gumbo. But we're not going there today. We just want to get the lumps out, get everything all incorporated, and let it cook out for just about a minute there. Once our roux is bubbling away and smells almost nutty or like something is baking, and we are good to add our dairy. And in this case, it comes in the form of 2½ cups of whole milk. Once everything is incorporated, you just want to stir it every few seconds to half a minute until it begins to thicken up. So what's going on here? Why does this work to thicken liquid? Well, you've got two things at play. You have the flour and your fat, in this case butter. Frying the flour in the fat allows each one of the little granules of flour to get coated and protected by the fat, so that when it starts to take on the water, or liquid, in this case milk, it can swell and grow, and that's what gives the sauce the body and that slightly thicker consistency. You do need to tend to it occasionally though, you don't want it to burn. Once the bechamel has come up to a simmer, you can see it will be much more viscous. It's not thick per se, but it definitely has more body to it than the milk would have had on its own. At this point, it can come off the heat, and we will add our final ingredients. First, some nutmeg. If you've never bought or ground your own nutmeg, I highly recommend it. You get much more flavor. It's a lot more economical. And it just smells great. Much better than that dried stuff in the plastic can. Speaking of that dried stuff in a plastic can, I've got some ground mustard. This, I'm not grinding my own mustard seeds. I'm going to go in with maybe about half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. This is really all about taste. If you like a little bit of a bite or zip to your sauce, cheese sauce, add more. If you don't like it or don't have it, you can leave it out. At this point, we're ready to go in with our cheese. Now, we are off the heat. There's plenty of residual heat left in the bechamel to melt the cheese, and we do not want to scorch the cheese or boil it. It tends to really make the texture unpleasant. So I'm just going to add the cheese in and get it incorporated. I've got 10 ounces of cheddar, and 6 ounces of Gruyere. Now you'll notice we didn't put any salt in our bechamel or pepper. Pepper tends to look a little weird with those black flecks, but the salt is really all within the cheese. We don't need to add any more salt to it. So I just switched to a spatula, and I'm just going to slowly stir this, letting that cheese melt into the sauce. Alright, I have here our 1 pound of cavatappi. I don't have to show you how to boil pasta, do I? Look, the only thing you need to know is that we're still going to cook this some more in the oven. So if the package says it cooks in 8 to 9 minutes, you want to go about 5 to 6 minutes. If the package says 10 to 11, maybe 6 to 7 minutes. But you only want to do it about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way done. Otherwise, if you cook your pasta all the way through, it'll really lose its structural integrity once we put it into the oven. So 1 pound of very al dente pasta, and our bechamel with cheese. Alright, our macaroni and cheese has been relocated to its final resting place, a 13 by 9 baking tray. And we could certainly pop it in the oven and have it like this, and I don't think anybody would complain. But one thing I talk about a lot is different texture combinations, and what we've got here is a lot of soft, creamy goodness. So if we can pair that with a little bit of crunch, I think it's going to up the flavor ante and the experience just a little bit. So I've got about 3/4 of a cup of panko breadcrumbs, and I've got the rest of our grated cheese. We won't be using all of it, but just want to sprinkle a little bit on there so people, know what's in it. I'm just going to lightly, gently shake our panko over the top. And you're not trying to go crazy here. You don't necessarily need it to completely coat the entire top. We may not even use all of it. We just want to add some interesting textural components here. All right, and finally, just a little extra cheese. This bad boy is going into a 375-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes until that cheese is melted, the panko breadcrumbs are golden brown, and you can see the cheese sauce bubbling up around the edges. Alright, so I want to put it out there before anyone says anything. I know what's going to happen. You can already see it. You guys are going to go out, get the ingredients to make this, you're going to get up to the cheese case, and you're going to have a minor heart attack when you find out that Gruyere cheese is typically about $20 a pound. It's steep, I know, but it's real cheese. It's imported, it's aged for a long time. There's a lot of reasons why it's kind of costly. It's also amazingly flavorful. It's got the salty nuttiness of like a Parmesan, has a little bit of that funk from like a blue cheese, but it's also just got a nice creamy sharpness like you would get out of a cheddar. I think it really elevates the dish, and I think it's definitely worth your while to at least once invest in it and try it out. And after all, you don't even need a whole pound of it, even less than half of a pound. Hopefully won't break the bank, but I can understand if you just want to go straight cheddar, I won't be offended. I'm sure it'll still be great. While we wait on our baked macaroni and cheese to come out of the oven and have its final cool down before we can dive in, it comes to my attention that there may come a time in the near future when you want, no, you need macaroni and cheese. And the thought of slaving away over a bechamel sauce and waiting patiently for a casserole dish to bake in the oven is just unthinkable. And in these times, these dark times, you may reach into that pantry for that blue or yellow box. But what, gasp, if it is not there, what are you to do? Well, let me help. A quick stovetop macaroni and cheese recipe begins with 6 ounces of elbow macaroni, that's right, the traditional stuff, in a medium-sized saucepan over high heat. You're going to add just enough cold water to cover the pasta. So in this case, it looks like a little over about a cup, cup and a half. And you're going to bring that up to a simmer. Once you've reached a boil, back the heat down just to maintain a simmer and cook according to the package directions. If you start to run low on water, you can add a splash more, but we want to wind up with most of the water evaporated once the pasta is done cooking. We're about halfway through the cooking process on the macaroni, and I just want to point out that you do want to stir it every minute or two to ensure that what liquid is left is equally dispersed throughout the pot and all the macaroni is cooking evenly. Alright, I have cooked the pasta exactly 8 minutes, which is what the minimum amount on the directions was. You can see there's still a little bit of liquid left in here, but what is left is extremely starchy, and that's going to help marry the cheese to the pasta. We will also require some dairy in the form of evaporated milk. 6 ounces, or about half the can. I'm also going to shake in just a pinch of dry mustard because I really like the flavor, but totally optional. And lastly, 6 ounces sharp cheddar cheese. I'm going to turn the heat to low and slowly stir everything to combine. I'd say that looks just about right. We have before us 2 entirely different takes on macaroni and cheese. One which comes together in about 10 minutes, another which takes the better part of an hour. Which one's better? Well, I think it's really a situational kind of thing. If you're having friends or company over, do you really want to serve them a bowl of something that looks like it might have just come out of the microwave? I mean, we know it didn't, but they don't. On the other hand, if you're coming in at 12 or 1 in the morning after a night of carousing around town with the lady folk or men folk alike, do you really want to wait an hour just to put some cheesy pasta down your gaping maw? No, I don't think so. If there is one thing both of these dishes have in common, though, is that they're both pretty costly when it comes to the calorie counter, if you know what I'm saying. So, as your gracious and humble host, I took the liberty of contacting some of my friends in the government and was able to get a law put into effect for the next 24 hours that any calories consumed do not count against you or your midsection. Now, it's only 24 hours, so you're going to have to act fast, but take my word for it. It'll be time well spent. I'm going to do a little quality control. But I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll give these recipes a try. And until I see you again, go make something delicious.